Hey everyone, welcome back to Chocolate and Spice to Brown Women Talk. I'm Nidhi, and today we are so excited to welcome Laura Mazer. She is head of the school at Montessori, and Laura is a former surgeon turned educational innovator who is now on leadership at Montessori.
And I am Neha. And what makes this conversation so special is it's about giving kids focused academic time with the support of AI powered learning and then returning that extra time to them for exploration, creativity, and independence.
And I actually know Laura because my son Vikram is in first grade there. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on our podcast. We'll just get right into it. For those who are not familiar, can you start by explaining what Montessori education really means and what makes it really different from traditional classrooms?
Yeah, so Montessori gets its name from Dr. Maria Montessori, who was an Italian physician, really worked in developmental psychology and an educational innovator about 100 years ago. So she developed a new form of education, originally working with younger children from 0 to 6, that was grounded in her observations of what those children needed in order to develop. So it was a very scientific form of education, a very empirical study of what she saw children capable of doing. And she created a very intentional system of education that today has stretched around the world with thousands of Montessori classrooms, still primarily focused on children 0 to 6, but now including the elementary plane, 6 to 12, and even 12 to 18 into adolescence. While there are a lot of features that make a Montessori classroom unique at each of those different planes, for me, what's fundamental about Montessori is that she really anchors the classroom in the child. She creates what she calls a prepared environment for the child to thrive. Today, you can go to Walmart and you can buy child-sized chairs and tables. They have little child-sized Adirondack chairs that you can put on your deck, right? Um, they exist because of Montessori. She was really the first person to suggest that instead of expecting a child to adapt herself to an environment designed for an adult, we should create an environment designed for the child to thrive. And then she did a lot of work defining what thriving looks like. And so she defined different stages or planes of development that a child goes through. From 0 to 6, the first plane of development or early childhood, from 6 to 12, elementary, and from 12 to 18, adolescence. She's not the only person to define sort of these predictable stages or planes of development, but she's unique in how she defines them. She defines them based on the type of independence that a child is striving for at each stage. So in early childhood from 0 to 6, she describes a child who's striving for physical independence. They are learning to control their own body. You guys have had toddlers in your life at some point. You know what it's like to try and get a toddler out of the house when they are adamant that they're going to put on their own shoes. You stop them from doing that and there is a meltdown. They need to push the button in the elevator, right? They are just compelled to control their physical form, to see what they're capable of. And the classroom responds to that need in a whole lot of ways, that and other key characteristics of the plane. Since we're going to talk a lot about elementary Montessori, which is less well known, I'll focus a little bit more there. The need Montessori says defines the elementary plane of development is a need for intellectual independence or cognitive independence. Just as the toddler needs to be able to zip his own jacket or push the button or put on his own shoes, the elementary age child from 6 to 12 needs to find out what their mind is capable of. They need to be able to follow flights of imagination. They're increasingly conceptual. They're smart, right? And we know this. You guys know this from seeing it in your own children. They are so smart and so capable and so excited about learning. If you go into an elementary classroom and you say, I want to give you a lesson on anything, right? Science, language, literature, snakes, dinosaurs, they are ready to go with you. The younger child's not capable of it, and the adolescent won't do it. They now want to know why, what's in it for them, how is this practically valuable in the world? But the elementary child just loves to learn. And tragically, it's the age in a lot of traditional systems where they are told that they're going to sit straight, they are going to learn what 28 other kids who happen to share a birth date with them are learning. Half of them are going too fast, half of them are going too slow, and every 40 minutes they're learning something else. And so a Montessori classroom is designed around that need, that driving sort of innate need for intellectual independence. So it's a mixed age classroom. Rather than sort of being constrained to only learn second grade material because you happen to be second grade age, children move as fast and as far as they're capable of. They get the content that they're ready for, and the classroom supports that because it supports a range of 6 years of ages, contents, and abilities. There are long open work periods where children can choose their work, focus deeply, alternate between things, where they have opportunities to stretch their intellectual muscle. Just like the young child needs to practice over and over again, zipping or tying a bow or buttoning a button, the older child needs room to iterate, to figure out how to expand and do something bigger and more creative, sometimes with friends or alone, and have that ability to be flexible, to be innovative, and to follow their own intellectual path. And so the main difference in a Montessori classroom is that it is entirely designed to support that child and that child's needs.
That is so cool. Thank you for walking us through what Montessori is. I've heard a lot about it. Just for context, my son's on grown up. He's in college now. So it's been a while. So it's very refreshing to hear how things are advancing. And I know you are yourself pioneering quite a few new concepts. So would really like to understand and learn from you, what are the new concepts you've introduced in your school system?
Yeah, so at Montessorium, our new Montessori elementary program, we have added a new material on the shelf. So we are bringing laptops into the Montessori classroom, but in a very particular way. We are partnering with Time Back, formerly 2 Hour Learning, and we're using a digital platform that has a suite of learning apps to help build individualized lesson plans and learning plans for every student every day. And so in addition to live Montessori lessons and practice with hands-on concrete Montessori materials, students also have an opportunity for repetitive practice to mastery across core academic subjects through sort of best-in-class digital tools and apps.
Amazing. So maybe to help our audience also to understand what all of this means, Laura. I mean, and I have spoken about this in introduction. The reason I'm close to this is my son Vikram, who's 6-year-old, it does go to Montessorium. So I do have an idea of what a typical day looks like. But for those who are not familiar, can you help them understand what happens when a kid walks in the classroom?
Yeah, so our school day starts at 8:30, and when children come in, they're greeted individually by their teacher, who we call a guide. They have that moment of personal connection as they're welcomed into the classroom, and then they launch into their morning jobs. So it's a Montessori classroom. The students take ownership of that space. They will put the chairs down, they'll clean the tables, they'll open the blinds, all of the things that need to happen for the school day to be able to start. They'll prepare snack, which happens sort of throughout the morning. And when the morning jobs are finished, they come to the rug for a full class morning meeting. The morning meeting is run by a student who will walk the class through sort of the same structure and steps every day. One student will be called on to show the day and the date on our calendar on the wall, and he'll say, it's this date and this day and this month, year, season. Another student will give a weather report for the day. Another will give a moon report because we're learning the phases of the moon. Sometimes we have fun facts or animal facts that are included in that morning meeting, or academic updates. And then we always have a little bit of an academic kickoff to the day. So we'll often do what we call a sentence of the day, where the guide has written a sentence on the whiteboard that has something to do with the focus that day, whether it's something we're learning about in the classroom, or we recently got a new bearded dragon, so there were a lot of sentences of the day about the lizard coming to the classroom. And the students will work together to diagram that sentence, to identify the parts of speech of each of the words, which is something they do collaboratively and really joyfully. And then they launch into the routine of copying that sentence of the day into their own writing journal. They have stencils in their binders with colored pencils to be able to indicate the parts of the speech, because in Montessori Elementary, we identify the parts of speech with specific colored symbols, which help students sort of accelerate grammar learning. And so that's sort of their first work for the day. And that takes a different amount of time for different children. A 6-year-old takes a little longer than a 9-year-old, but there's also a 9-year-old who's absolutely meticulous and will take a little bit longer than a 7-year-old who writes, a little bit more quickly. And then they grab their work journal. And the work journal is what we call a tool of accountability in the Montessori classroom. So it's a key feature of any sort of traditional or thriving Montessori elementary classroom. Traditionally, they're just black and white composition books that the students usually decorate and sort of make their own. And every day they'll turn to the next page in their work journal and they will write out the day. So they'll write out, today is Sunday, September 21st, or whatever day it is. And then they'll start to track their day. And it's the scaffolding to build executive functioning, to build time management. It is what lets a 6-year-old like Vikram be able to control his day and take ownership of all of the things he needs to do in that day in a way that, having taught at the college and postgraduate level, a lot of our 18 to 24-year-olds haven't yet figured out. But we want to build starting at age 6. So they'll grab their work journal, they'll write the time, and they'll write what they're going to do, because they're now, once they get dismissed from the rug, in the 3-hour open work period of a Montessori elementary classroom. During that work period, they're going to do what we call work cycles. They're going to choose something to work on. They're going to work on it for a given amount of time, return that material to the shelf or wherever it goes, and then go back to their work journal to choose what they do next. Somewhere on a board or a screen is a schedule of lessons. So they're going to check that, similar to how we might have an open work day, right? If you tend to work from home, but you have a couple of scheduled meetings and you have to figure out when you're going to do your more long creative work in between those appointments. So a few students might start their day with a lesson. The guide will pull them to the rug in the back of the classroom and set up for a lesson using math materials or a science lesson, history, literature. Another student might decide to grab the golden beads off the shelf and finish up some follow-up work or do a little bit more repetitive practice with the material from a lesson she got yesterday. Another student might decide to start with time back and grab their laptop. And they'll grab their laptop, they'll grab headphones, they'll set up at a table or using a lap desk, and they'll log on to the platform and finish some of their digital lessons for that day. Another student might decide to work on a long-term project. They'll be writing, they'll be doing follow-up assignments. And that's what they'll do throughout that 3-hour morning. They'll work on each material or lesson until they're ready to transition. They put the materials away. At some point, they might decide to take a break and have snack. We have a snack table in our little mini kitchen. Up to 4 children can have snack at any one given time. They serve themselves. They clean up after themselves. They put the dishes in the dishwasher. And then they transition back to work. And that's our morning. And then we have a communal family-style lunch. We have outdoor time for recess. We come back in, we usually do a read aloud and then go into an afternoon work period. We'll have more live lessons with the guide. This is also where we tend to have more of our bigger group lessons. So we might have more involved science labs. We might have art lessons. We do a lot of literature circles, which is a small group of students who are all reading the same chapter book, coming together to discuss the latest chapters that they've read. And students who are not in one of those activities are continuing to choose their work, grabbing their laptop if they haven't finished their laptop lessons, following up on their follow-up work, or engaged in their own independent projects if they finished everything that was assigned to them. At the end of the day, we finish with end-of-day jobs. We come back to the rug for a transition. We usually have students share out things they're proud of from the day or shout outs to classmates who they saw do something great that day. And then we transition to aftercare.
So beautiful. It feels like, every child is given the importance that they need and the time and the space to develop the way they ought to have, right? Like if they were not in a classroom where everybody had to do this one thing. Just so amazing.
Yeah.
And that is why my sister keeps asking me, like, why did we make the choice of coming to a Montessori school, a Montessorium, versus any of the other choices that we had. And that's one of the reasons why we deeply connect to Montessori. We both are, my sister and I and our husbands, we are in the tech field, and we understand what's happening in the world with AI. We work deeply with it. So I keep coming back to one question, like, how can I set my kid with success, like with whatever the world is going to be moving forward? And one thing that I keep coming back to is helping him build his core strength in curiosity, problem solving, kindness, taste, and emotional intelligence. And that is where I think Montessori and Montessorium helps so much, because of everything you talked about, like accountability, all of these things that they are learning. Like Vikram comes back and he tells me every day that, today I didn't spend enough time in language, but I know that I'm very aware of it. And tomorrow I'll go back and spend more time in it. Like a 6-year-old, I was eating dirt when I was 6-year-old. So, the way his mind is working, and I think how you all and the guides are setting the kids up for success, it just gives me so much joy.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. Yeah, it's interesting. Some of what you're describing is sort of the things that made you or prompted you to pick Montessori. Part of the challenge is we ask so much from an elementary child today. As the world evolves and as the world gets more complicated, even if you compare to 100 years ago when Montessori herself was working, we ask a lot of an elementary classroom because we need a lot, right? The elementary child deserves a lot. You do absolutely need to build those executive functioning skills. This is the time when they're going to really build time management in particular, the ability to focus, maybe even if it's boring, right? Ability to get that little bit of grit, but also kindness and what we call grace and courtesy and social skills. And then also academic content, right? Like all of that is amazing. And also they need to learn their times tables. It's not optional that they can spell. We actually have strong emotions about handwriting, which not everybody shares, but there's a lot of core skills that open the door for future academic success. I can tell you how successful you will be in your first algebra course based on your understanding of fractions, right? So those core academic content areas and skill areas will either open or close doors. And of course, we look at this 6-year-old and we want the entire world to be open to them. And part of the reason I'm so excited by Montessorium and so excited by the power and potential of bringing these tech tools into the classroom is I think it expands our capacity to have it all. Because we're not willing to give any of that up. We're not willing to have less time for personal exploration because we know how essential that is for the elementary child. We're not willing to give up the amount of time it takes to put the child in control because it's much more efficient for the adult to lead, right? If the adult told every child what to do every minute of the day, it would be more efficient. But you wouldn't be teaching a child how to manage their own time. They would lose all of that sort of magic of the Montessori classroom. But you need enough structure to make sure they're touching those core academic subjects that simply take repetitive practice, right? There's no shortcut to learning your math facts. You just have to practice them every day. And to be able to bring in these really well-designed tech tools that have the repetitive practice on lockdown means that the guides in the classroom can focus on everything else.
That's amazing. So, just to go a little bit deeper into I'm assuming Time Back is the name for the software that is AI based. Okay. So are students able to, in this case, little kids, are they able to talk to that software, clarify questions, or does the software give them structured input and they clarify things with their teachers?
That's a great question. There is no chatbot. There's no interaction between a child and any AI. The platform is a very clean, minimalistic dashboard that they log into that simply says, here are your lessons for the day. And the lessons take them to learning apps. Where they'll work through mini lessons or problems. And it can be anything from a math lesson followed by practice to a reading comprehension practice where they will read it aloud to the computer, and the computer will help them if they're stumbling or unable to identify a word. It'll sort of flag mispronunciations and give them definitions, kind of thing. And then they'll get some reading comprehension questions. When they're a little older, they get vocab and spelling practice. And then it all feeds back into that dashboard. So if they're having challenges, part of it is some of the apps are adaptive. So it will actually identify that this content is a little too advanced for them, and it'll take them back or give them more explanation. They also have guides in the classroom who they can always ask and are keeping an eye on them when they're on the laptop. So we'll provide direct support. And then we also have the ability actually to set them up with coaching calls. So especially as students get more advanced, the platform can support through high school AP 12th grade courses. So there is no limit to what a child, even at age 6, 7, 8, can be doing. And sometimes either they're having some challenges with the nature of the app, or they're starting to learn content that maybe there's not an expert in the room. And so another feature is they can always schedule a coaching call with a live expert. So for example, if you have a student who's starting to do trigonometry while still in elementary, even the best elementary guide in the world might not be able to support that kind of advanced work. Not only do they have lessons at their level, they also have access to live experts.
And Didi, and Didi is what I call my sister in Hindi, and Vikram had a live session. So he came back home and he said, I requested help. I don't know what it's called in the app. It's love or something. You call for help. And he said, I requested help. And I was like, who helped you? And he said, oh, a very kind person helped me. And I was like, oh, so did you even understand what they were saying? Yeah, it was very clear. They were so kind. And I was like, oh, so, we talk about stranger danger. And I was like, all right, so you're not scared. But he was like, I was in the classroom. Everybody was in the classroom. So they understand the concept of how even getting help from technology and a real person help them walk through the problem, talk to them, and they were kind. So, that was very nice to hear.
That's awesome.
All right. So a few of the other questions that we have for you, Laura, is what results are you seeing with this Time Back or, the 2-hour courses, or 2-hour, not the courses. How do I describe it? 2-hour.
The dashboard. Yeah. Yes. So we're a new program. Montessorium is starting just this year, but Time Back is not new. That dashboard and the tech platform that we're using has been around for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. It was originally developed in the Alpha School Network here in Austin, and now it's being used at a variety of sister schools and homeschools and all of these places. And the data from the folks who've been using it for several years is pretty much unsurpassed in the educational landscape. It's pretty incredible when you look at their results. So Alpha schools report their data in a way that almost no school network is willing to do. So we here at Montessorium and at Alpha use the NWEA MAP test as sort of our standardized test of choice and our barometer to show growth. And it's just the most commonly used standardized test in the country to compare student outcomes. And in general, Alpha doesn't get superstar students. It's not like everybody who comes in is testing at the 99th percentile. They tend to get students who come in testing at the 40th to 60th percentile, average, like everybody else. They leave testing in the 99th. So they just released their latest data, and essentially anyone who's been there for 2 years is now in the 99th percentile for achievement. It's unbelievably good, to the point where the MAP test is normed. It's nationally normed to grade level comparisons. So Nidhi, you've gotten Vikram's beginning of year MAP tests, and it says, compared to other first graders, you're at the, 50th, 60th, 70th, 80th, 90th percentile. And then at the end of the year, you'll also get, compared to other sixth graders, you've grown, at the 50th percentile just as much as most, or you've grown at the 90th percentile or whatever it might be. And those achievement scores are compared to national averages that are always 5 years old. So every 5 years, the national comparison gets updated, just because you can't compare every year real time. They can't do the calculations that quickly. So for the past 5 years, we've been comparing to 2020 averages. The 2025 MAP averages just got released, which is nationwide, hundreds of thousands of students. They've gotten worse. They've gotten so much worse that a student getting about the same number of questions right has almost gained a grade level without learning anything, because the average student has gotten worse, which means that across the country, an education system we already thought was not doing a particularly good job is getting worse. At Time-Back schools, at Alpha, at Montessori, we are considering continuing to norm to the 2020 numbers, because we don't want to lower the bar, because our students are getting better.
Those numbers are really promising. But have you seen any concerns from parents? Like, what you're talking about is something that currently is not prevalent in all the schools. So this is very revolutionary thing that you're bringing in school. So there must be concerns. I had expressed my concerns to you before I enrolled Vikram at this school, whether it was this technology, how it can be addictive, what are the repercussions of it, how the data is being utilized, and AI. And when you throw AI in front of 6-year-old, what all happens? So any comments on those things? How would you help a parent feel better?
Yeah, all of those are concerns. I think all of us today, or the vast majority of people today, sort of accept that technology isn't going anywhere. AI isn't going anywhere, right? These things are here to stay. This is the future. But we want to be very thoughtful about how we bring these things into our lives, especially when we're dealing with children, right? We are all sort of aware that technology has enormous potential, but like any other tool, it can be used poorly or well. And so, we certainly have parents who are concerned about screen time, full stop. And partly I say, partly it's, we have screen time. We have students in front of screens. I don't think all screen time is created equal. I think the question is not if a child is engaging with a screen, but what they're doing on that screen. Interestingly, I recently rediscovered this phenomenal Montessori quote from, 100 years ago, where she was talking about the fact that none of her children in her early schools in Rome would ever see an elephant. But she was able to bring a photo of an elephant into the classroom, and how amazing was it that she could expand their world in that way. And, video was in its early stages. And she said, if only there was a way for me to bring video into the classroom and show my children a moving elephant, their world would be expanded. And similarly, I think of screen time in that way, right? Is it achieving the same objectives we have always had in the classroom more efficiently, more effectively, with more information? Is it a capacity expander for the guides? Is it a mind expander for the children? Then I want it. And if it's not achieving those objectives, then I think about it the same way I think about any tool we're bringing in. And then from a very practical standpoint, I always also tell parents that, the majority of the day is still off screens. And partly what the screens are enabling a student to do is ensure that they are meeting standards of academic excellence while still getting to do project work and to, our students are currently trialing out different recipes for apple cider because we're making apple cider for our next, student showcase, and they're planning trips off campus, and we're doing science experiments where we're, shooting up rockets using baking soda and vinegar. And I want them to do all of that stuff. And I want them to do all of that stuff without sacrificing academic outcomes. And that is something that we have not seen happen almost anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I think tech is the tool that lets us have it all, that lets us, sort of avoid sacrificing either of those objectives.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree. And like Nidhi mentioned earlier, we both are techies and we've worked in tech for 20 plus years. And like that's the fascinating part with AI, which is you could help kids be really like naturally curious, and you could satisfy their curiosity without the added burden of, it's a classroom. How do you help every single kid's curiosity blossom or be satisfied? And these kind of tools really help. I mean, obviously in a monitored environment and with some guidance, but it also helps them blossom into curious adults, right? Like that's what we need in this world, like understanding how to use technology to the best possible way. Because currently we're at the stage where, at least in my opinion, it's not, it's not being used the best way it could be, and it's potentially because it's a newer area. And if kids grow up with that and learn how to use it to the best of the world, I think it's amazing. So kudos to you and your team for introducing it and working through all the kinks. I'm sure there are.
Yeah, we definitely have conversations about, sometimes the Wi-Fi goes out and then we don't use the laptops. Yeah. But I do also want to make sure that parents know, again, there's no chatbot. The students are not directly engaging with an LLM. There's no they don't actually realize that AI is running in the background. Mm-hmm. They are doing lessons that are sort of a pedagogically designed scope and sequence and intentionally sort of curated. A lot of what's happening in the back end on AI is all of that data about how they did on that lesson, from the amount of time it took them to how many questions they got right, to whether or not they're stopping to read the answer explanations or not, is being fed into an AI model. And then that data is fed back to the guides in the classroom. And so the guides are able to identify students who need a little bit of extra support or students who need extra challenge. So it both identifies places where students are not engaging well and they are not being successful, but also it flags, hey, it looks like this content's too easy for this student. We're going to assign a placement test and we're going to see if they're able to pass that test and move on to more challenging material. So we just had, a couple of students actually this week move on from 2nd to 3rd grade material on the apps, or 3rd grade to 4th grade material on the apps. And they're doing that because they're ready. And the amount of data we get from the system really helps us ensure that students aren't bored, but that they're also not lost.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, I feel like the word AI or the term AI these days is super associated with generative AI, chatbot and all of that jazz. But AI as a system can be extremely powerful at the back end to create the sort of like front end system that can be more easily used. So I think that's what you're alluding to, which is it's really behind the scene is the brain that helps power the education system for each kid individually, which is amazing. Yeah.
And it's also a conversation. So for example, we had a student who on his reading app, the system actually flagged, hey, it looks like these lessons are too easy. We're going to give him a placement test. And he took the placement test and he failed it. But I was keeping an eye on the placement test. And so, he actually came up to me, he's like, Laura, come here. See, I took a placement test and we saw that you need 90% to pass the placement test. And he had gotten like 85%. And so I had to tell him, like, you actually didn't pass the placement test. And he thought about it for a while. And he's like, okay, let's go through the questions I got wrong. Let's find out why, which I love. And I am definitely seeing that growth mindset develop in so many of our students. So I sat down next to him and we reviewed, and I realized that the questions he got wrong, he'd misread something. There was like a way in which they were talking about long and short vowel sounds that was a little different than the way it had been presented to him, but he knew the concept. So he should have passed the test. So I flagged it for our academic team. He's going to retake it on Monday. I'm 100% confident he's going to pass. So it's always a conversation. I would not have known he was quite ready for it. It would have taken me longer to realize he needed more challenge, but the system wouldn't have realized what had happened in the classroom, that the placement test results needed to be tweaked. And so it's a combination. It's a communication between the data we're getting automatically filtered and the judgment of the person who's live and working with the students.
Yeah, and it totally promotes a growth mindset, which you refer to. Love that idea, growth, and you're really competing with yourself. You're
Yeah.
not. The system really ensures that, and therefore you grow for yourself, which the world sorely needs. So,
And that was the selling point too. When Laura told us like the technology will be there to benefit your kids, not the other. Like there isn't like one tool for everyone. The tool is going to grow with your child. So if they are behind in something, they'll make sure you catch up. And if the tool is able to see, or technology is able to see that you are actually better than first grade in something, then they'll help you. They'll meet you where you are, and that is something I think might be lacking in traditional classrooms. So that is something that really resonated with me.
it's amazing. Awesome. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspectives. It's super, super inspiring to hear how your new system, as well as Time Back, are reimagining what it looks like to be a kid in an elementary school.
Yeah. And speaking as a parent, it does mean so much to see Vikram not only thriving academically, but also building independence, curiosity, joy in the process. And the fact that he loves going to school, that is like the best thing ever. So we really appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me on to be able to talk about Montessorium and this new vision for Montessori. And, we love Vikram and he's such an incredible addition to the classroom. So it's really wonderful to get to chat with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, again. And for everyone listening, we're leaving links and resources from Laura and Montessorium in the show notes so you can dive deeper about all the models that we discussed today.
Thank you for joining. See you next time.
Bye.